Greetings, my name is Jen Hatton-Flisher, and today I'm discussing some of the important elements related to ecofeminism and how these elements provide foundational support for eco-justice education. I want to begin by providing some brief history about ecofeminism. Like feminism itself, ecofeminism has been around in both theory and practice for a long time. However, the specific term ecofeminism is frequently cited as emerging in the 1970s alongside the second wave feminist and green movements. It's for this reason that ecofeminism simultaneously grew out of both the activist and academic movements at the time. Ecofeminism, however, should not be simply seen as an environmental movement by women or an environmental theory by women. In fact, what distinguishes ecofeminism from many other ecological movements is that it draws specific parallels between the oppression of women and the oppression of nature. It's important to note that while there's a great deal of diversity within ecofeminism, the overriding consensus is that these social and environmental issues are not separate, that the causes for the mistreatment of women and the mistreatment of the environment stem from the same place. Furthermore, analyses of systems of oppression frequently extend outward to include other marginalized groups as well. That's similar to other branches of feminism. The following definition provided by Greta Gard highlights the intersectionality of ecofeminism. Here she states, drawing on the insights of ecology, feminism, and socialism, ecofeminism's basic premise is that the ideology which authorizes oppression, such as those based on race, class, gender, sexuality, physical abilities, and species, is the same ideology which sanctions the oppression of nature. Ecofeminism calls for an end of all oppressions, arguing that no attempt to liberate women or any other oppressed group will be successful without an equal attempt to liberate nature. Its theoretical base is a sense of self most commonly expressed by women and various other non-dominant groups, a self that is interconnected with all life. It is also in this quote that we can see how ecological justice and social justice aspects of eco-justice education begin to emerge. In fact, I would argue that one of the most fundamental beliefs between both ecofeminism and eco-justice education is that you cannot pick and choose equality. Meaning inequality for some means inequality for all, because it signifies an underlying hierarchies and dualisms are still in existence within societal structures. The origin of the connectivity between women and nature has been assessed from a variety of perspectives. The assertion that women are more connected to nature than men is particularly controversial within ecofeminism and caused some women to leave or abandon ecofeminism. In part, it's because for many feminists, this is dismissed essentialism because it seemingly is that there are inherent differences between men and women, thereby providing further justification for women's subordination and oppression. As Karen Warren notes, any view that makes any group of humans closer to nature than any other is conceptually flawed and methodologically suspect because it maintains dualistic and hierarchical thinking that is critiqued by ecofeminism. That's not to suggest that the woman-nature connection doesn't exist. In fact, it's the examination of these connections to societal institutions that continue to be at the forefront of ecofeminist theory. Karen Warren argues that there are 10 such types of woman-nature connections that have been identified by ecofeminists. I want to go over each of these connections because they play an important role in our understanding of what ecofeminism is and what it is attempting to do, but it also plays an important role in understanding the connection to eco-justice education. So let's start with the first one on historical connections. So scholars examining historical connections are frequently centered on pinpointing cultural and economic shifts in history that benefited from oppressions. So, for example, in The Death of Nature, Carolyn Merchant focused on the scientific revolution and industrialization as this historical connection. Conceptual connections examine value hierarchies and dualisms that we've discussed, such as those offered by Vale Plumwood, but also the logic of domination discussed by Karen Warren. And also included in this section would be sex-body differences related to such things as like reproduction that could situate women's experiences with nature differently. Not that it is necessarily an inherent difference, but is a difference based off of these body differences. Empirical connections examine the relationship between marginalized groups with environmental degradation. This could be in the form of studies on the disproportionate effects of lead exposure, pesticides, or other toxins in marginalized groups. Or it could be in the link in practices and policies, such as the similarities between animal and human slavery that we discussed. Socioeconomic connections explore how capitalist patriarchal systems disadvantage women and exploit nature. Included in this examination is its relationship to the underdevelopment and exploitation of indigenous peoples. In fact, we started this semester showing or watching Vandana Shiva's work in this area. And in fact, her contribution has been very important in this regard to ecofeminism. Another type of woman-nature connection is that in the linguistic connections. And those are important here because we often see connections in how women are animalized or naturalized. For example, in derogatory names for women are often linked to animals. And then at the same time, there's also a feminization of nature, and such as Mother Nature, for example. And doing so maintains the othering of both, but it also goes back to reinforcing those dualisms. Symbolic and literary connections often focus on how women and nature are frequently devalued in art and literature and media. Spiritual and religious connections often exist on two fronts. The first takes a critical look at how these connections are located in existing religions and theological works, and then the second seeks to establish new spiritualities that draw from these connections between women and nature. Epistemological, I think I said that right, connections challenge current ways of knowing and demand better. Certainly, Plumwood's critique of rationalism highlights that knowledge is not detached and objective, even though it is often presented as being just that. Political connections tend to focus on the activist side of ecofeminism to change current conditions. However, I would argue from an eco-justice standpoint, any changes in this realm would likely be seen as temporary unless more is done at the conceptual level to address value hierarchies. Scholarship on the ethical connections in this area frequently asserts that a feminist ethical analysis of nature is necessary. As we learned from both Chris Cuomo and Plumwood this semester, environmental ethics tends to be both anthropocentric and androcentric. The works that have been born from these connections to women and nature have galvanized ecofeminism's place within the field, but has also been influential to many other fields in theory development. Certainly, eco-justice education is a primary example that has not only integrated aspects of ecofeminism, but also from other fields in education, sociology, philosophy, and environmental sciences to foster new ways of knowing that promote social justice, equality, and sustainability. Thank you very much.